Hey, it's Sabrina. So I haven't filmed in a while because I feel like I've just been really sick lately. I've been fighting a cold for weeks now and I've been too lazy to go to the doctor. So if I clear my nose or my throat a lot, I apologize in advance. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a recent reading wrap up. So I haven't done a wrap up for January or February. So I thought that I would go through and kind of talk about my experience with the Diversathon and the books I read for that, my January wrap up and my February wrap up. So grab a snack because this is going to be a long one. The first book that I read this year in the month of January was The Girls by Emma Cline. Now this was a book that took me months and months to read. I kept picking it up and putting it back down. I feel like because I have researched and learned so much about the Manson murders that this book was just kind of lackluster for me. Don't get me wrong, Emma Cline's a fantastic author and I think her writing style is very cool and unique. However, this book just hit the mark for me. I felt like the flashbacks between present day and past were too, the jump wasn't super clear, so it would be hard for me to tell whenever she was switching back and forth. So I'd be reading about a character and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then it took me a second to realize, oh, we've flashed back to the present. So that was really frustrating for me. Also, the ending was just not what I was expecting it to be. While I do get that this is kind of a fiction book that was based off the Manson murders, this was definitely more a book about the character and her experience in it and how she's kind of dealt with it as an adult. And honestly, I just didn't love it. It didn't hit the mark for me. And I feel like there are a lot of other books that are just better out there. The next book I read in January was 2x2 by Nicholas Sparks. I really loved this book. I listened to it on audiobook and I just really enjoyed it. I still to this day have not found a Nicholas Sparks book that I didn't love. This one was about a man and his, so this story, the protagonist in this story is a man who is having a hard time in his marriage and he has a daughter with this woman, and it kind of chronicles his life and how one day he thought his life was perfect and he was really happy, and then all these things start to happen to him and he feels like his life is crumbling. So the story is just about his journey of finding true happiness and figuring out how to balance his life and confront some feelings. And so I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So for the Diversathon, the group book was Underground Railroad, and then I was going to read The Fire This Time and Under the Udala Trees, and also I Am Malala. Out of all those books, I finished one full one, and then I tried to start another one and I DNF'd it. So the first book that I finished and loved was Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Oparanta. I think she is African, I don't know what country this is, Nigeria. So I think she's a Nigerian author. And this was such a good coming of age story. There were there were a few slow parts where I was kind of like, okay, let's hurry through this. But I love the narrator's voice. It felt so true to what the characters would have sound like. And it's just a coming of age story about a girl who discovers that she might be a lesbian, and how in her culture and this time period it wasn't really acceptable. And so it just talks about her life and how she is dealing with this, and it's just so interesting and it's so different. It's not like any other book I've ever read. So if you want to read a book by a person of color and about a culture that is not American, then I would highly recommend it. And I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So I did not end up reading I Am Malala, and then I tried to read The Underground Railroad, but I didn't finish it. I got about 60 pages in and I just couldn't. I don't know what it was about this book. For me, maybe it was just a really slow beginning and I just didn't get into it. And there was a lot of backstory that I feel like wasn't super necessary. So it made me really sad because I wanted to love this book. I heard good things about it and I know a lot of people loved it, but it just didn't work for me. And I'm kind of going through this thing right now where I'm not going to waste my time forcing myself to read books that I don't enjoy, even if it's not a popular opinion, because last year I spent so much time putting pressure on myself to read books that everyone else was reading, even if I didn't like it, and I wasted time, and it totally reflected in the amount of books that I read. So DNF that one. All right, so the month of February, the first book that I tried and attempted to read was Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. Since February was the month of love, in my opinion, also Black History Month, I thought I would try to take a shot at some contemporary novels or some books that had romance in them. And I was like, you know, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist is actually a really cute movie. And so I tried to read the book, but guys, I just couldn't. Just don't even waste your time. It's such a pile of trash. Which, you know, I don't say lightly. There's not a lot of books that I really dislike, but this one was just not good for me. It was super juvenile. There was the F word and a curse word every other sentence. I just feel like it was super hard for me to relate. Even me reading this at 16, I don't think I would have liked it. And I also didn't love the main character, Nora. I didn't like her at all. I feel like she was just a weak female character, and I didn't really find myself being related to her. Like, I didn't find her relatable to me, if that makes sense. The next book I read for the month of February was Ask the Passengers by A.S. King. Now, this was the first book that I have ever tried or read by A.S. King. I've heard a lot about this author. I know Ariel Bissett really loves her. And so this was also another coming of age story about a girl who discovers that she is a lesbian. I don't know what, that was my theme for the month of February, I guess. I really didn't read much about these books before I started them. So a lot of this I was reading by accident. Anyway, so I really loved this one more than Under the Udala Trees. I don't know what it was, but I think for me, I just really liked the character. She was, to me, a little bit intricate and complicated in a way that I can't really explain unless you read it for yourself. But yeah, so this girl, it starts with this girl, she's with her family, and they move from New York to this town, New York City, to this small town where everyone knows everybody, and she feels like nobody cares about her, and she hates this town, and she wants to get away from it, and she realizes that she has these feelings for this girl, and she's really worried about, you know, telling her family that this is what she is. And for a long time, she would refuse to accept that she was a lesbian and kept dodging the question. And so eventually, the story is her figuring out, okay, I am a lesbian. I'm okay with it. I'm going to tell people. And her family was surprisingly really accepting. So I enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. Now, this was just a strange book. I cannot even begin to describe what this book is about. Honestly, to me, it's like the Neil Gaiman book. Well, which book is it? Okay, so what I was trying to say was Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, to me, is a lot like The Ocean at the End of the Lane, in that it's super hard to describe what it's about. And unless you read it, it's hard to really get like what the plot is, if that makes sense. So if I were to summarize it, really, Fever Dream is exactly, the book is exactly what the title says. You are reading or listening to this. Well, I was listening to an audiobook, and I was listening to this thinking like, okay, the title of this book is perfect, because this whole time you're listening to the story, you're thinking, yes, this is exactly what would happen if you were having a fever dream, if that makes sense. So it's about this woman who is in this hospital, and she's dying, I think, and there's this young boy who's not her son, and she keeps having these like memories or flashes of things that happened, I guess, before she got sick. And it's just so weird, because there's like a little bit of, I feel like a little bit of like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you could call it magic or witchcraft. I don't know, like today's society would call it. And it's just such a strange book, but the ending was good enough in that I felt like overall it was an enjoyable read. You're going through it, and it's such a small book, and it's such a fast read that you're like, okay, I want to see what happens now, what happens next. And at the end, you're like, okay, well, that was a really weird book, but somehow enjoyable. I don't know, it's hard to explain. So I ended up giving that 3 out of 5 stars. And the last and final book that I read was The 5 Love Languages by Gary, I can't remember his name. I think his last name starts with a C. I'll put a picture of it here. So I have really been on a nonfiction or like self-help kick. And that's one of the reasons why I picked up this book. if you're in a relationship, it doesn't matter if you're married, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, even it just your siblings or your parents, if you're struggling to get along with them, then I would highly suggest reading this book, because it teaches you to kind of figure out like, okay, what is the way that I like to be communicated to? What is the way that I like to be shown appreciation? And you have a quiz at the end of the book. It tells you like where you are, and then figuring out where your partner is, then it helps with that communication and kind of bridge the gap of where you're like miscommunicating. And so I find that it was really helpful, and I definitely give it 5 out of 5 stars. I would highly recommend it. It was such a great book. So that is everything that I read for the last couple months. I am so excited for this year. I feel like I have so many great books that I'm excited to read. If you aren't subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you did. I'll talk to you very, very soon. And of course, thanks for watching. This one is one that I ordered online, and it's the Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, which is like everyone and their mom has heard about this book. Super popular. Ever